Recording. So there is actually only one slide on selecting candidates, but there's enough here that I think I can talk through what's involved. So as I say, up till now we've been looking at the recruitment methods, so now we're going to look at how to select the candidates. So as I said at the beginning, you normally have candidates applying for the job either by filling in an application form or a CV, and receiving those and deciding who goes forward to interview is the first part of your selection process. So you would shortlist the applications, whether it's an application form or a CV, or it could be a combination of both, looking at the essential and desirable criteria for the interview. So as I say, you would start off with all of your applications and see who doesn't meet the criteria at all. Then they would be discounted. You would then look at the ones that are essential and the ones that have some or all of the desirable, and the more desirable that they meet, the more desirable criteria they meet, the more likely it is that they will go forward for interview. The company would then set up interviews. Again, depending on the kind of job, it may be telephone interviews, or nowadays much more common to be on Zoom or some other video conferencing facilities, but could be an online interview. Traditionally could be face-to-face. Those could be face-to-face with one person or with a panel. The advantage of a panel interview is there's less likelihood of there being bias, because if it's a one-to-one situation, you're automatically going to judge someone by how they appear, the information that's given at the interview. You will always be forming opinions, and we can certainly try to guard against that. But if you've got more than one person on the interview panel, then it's less likely that bias will be a major factor in deciding who's going to go for the job. But that's also where the job description and the person specification come in, because the questions that you create should be linked to the job description and the person specification. They should be about the ability to do the job. They should not be personal questions asking about family commitments or anything like that. So there shouldn't be anything that could be classified as discriminatory. All the questions should be based on the job description, based on the person specification, and every candidate should be getting asked the same questions as well. So interviews statistically are probably the least reliable form of selection method, but they're the most popular. And as I say, the way we get around that and try to improve the reliability and validity of them is by having set questions that we ask every candidate, so everybody can feel or should feel that they're being treated the same way, they're being selected against the same criteria. And as well, if you've got more than one person and the candidates are being scored, it should all be less subjective. You can give candidates practical tests. So for example, if you're recruiting someone for reception, you would want to give them maybe keyboard tests, skills tests, give them, you might do a telephone interview as part of a practical test, as part of a skills test, to see how do they perform on the telephone, how do they cope under pressure. You could have them doing role plays so that you're looking to see how they deal in a particular situation. With management type jobs and certainly lecturing jobs, it's quite common to ask someone to undertake a presentation. You may also have kind of in-tray exercises where they may be given a selection of different tasks or assignments to complete, and given a specification of what's required, how long to do things. A few years ago I applied for a curriculum manager post within the college, and they called it an assessment centre, and I'll come back to talk about an assessment centre in a moment or two. But what they did do was, as well as the one-to-one interview, which was a panel interview with 3 people on the panel, we were also given a couple of exercises to complete. So we're given scenarios like a case study and asked how we would deal with this situation, how would we respond, and we had to type up a response, a report back, and we had a limited amount of time within which to complete it, but we were also told that we had to do it on one page. So there were constraints to see how you worked under pressure, whether you could follow the brief, whether you were able to present the information succinctly, all on one page. So all of these things together were part of the practical tests, if you like, to see how you reacted in a particular situation, but they used case studies rather than role plays, for example. An assessment centre is where you invite a lot of candidates along to an assessment centre, to a centre. Sometimes it can be a couple of hours, as was the case with the college situation, or it could be a full day, or perhaps even over a few days, where you are maybe recruiting either quite senior staff, so you want to see how they cope in different situations. So rather than organising maybe multiple interview dates over a period of time, you do everything in the one day. So you might have group interviews or group tasks to see how they interact with each other. Are they demonstrating leadership skills? Or if you put people into a team, who takes control? Who demonstrates those team leadership qualities that you might be looking for? So you can identify the different roles that people play within teams and what the dynamic's like. You might give them one-to-one interviews, you might do group interviews, but you're also likely to do tests. That could be presentations, it could be practical tests, have them all doing a numeracy test or a literacy test all at the same time. So there's lots of different things that could be happening within an assessment centre, but it's usually set up with lots of different types of activities to see how people respond in different situations. And as I say, it can span across a full day or a week, or it depends on the situation. It could be a company's recruiting 50 staff and they just want to do it as quickly as possible, so they have an assessment centre with 100 candidates all at the one time, and they have a few staff on hand that are all observing and watching what's going on. Or it could be used to select more senior management, so you want to see how they cope over a prolonged period of time. It's argued that with an interview, you're maybe in for 20 minutes, half an hour, you can project the best of yourself that you can for that short period of time, but to maintain that over a longer period is more difficult. And you don't always know when you're being observed and when you're not. So it is argued that an assessment centre is more reliable, but because it's such a long period of time and it involves tests and different things like that, it is less popular with candidates. Psychometric tests are something that usually would also feature within an assessment centre, and a lot of companies do use them, and they're a way to assess the psychological character of someone. Generally speaking, it's not something that you pass or fail. It's more to find out, do you fit in to this particular type of role? Will you fit in with the team? So they want to make sure that the personality is going to fit, that you've got the right kind of characteristics. So a lot of companies will run psychometric tests to find out, it can also be things like to find out how honest you are, what you're, do you have good morals? Do you have integrity? So sometimes, the police force will use it to find out, are these people trustworthy and reliable? But these things are all very subjective. And one of the things with psychometric tests is you can figure out how to cheat them. If a company uses the same psychometric test over and over again, there are guides online, or you can buy books that will tell you how to pass psychometric testing. But you need to know what the company's looking for. As I say, it's not a case of, you need to score 50% to pass or something like that. It is looking to see this is what we're looking for from our person. It's like taking what goes into the person specification and getting a psychologist to develop it and analyse it and coming up with the criteria that they think matches that person specification. And then you're undertaking a psychometric test to see how well you fit. Because the last thing you want as well is to get a job where you don't feel part of the team, where you're just not fitting in, where you're just not gelling. And sometimes the psychometric tests can be used to help the company to establish that as well. So, moving now on to induction. This is quite a lengthy section as well. So the selection methods was just about looking at how we select what we're looking for. The other part of the list of things that we had at the beginning also talked about making the offer, and we don't actually have a slide on that. So making the offer is exactly as the word suggests. You've gone through your selection criteria. Other selection criteria could include taking up references. You decide that you want to employ the person, you want to offer them the job. The offer you make will be subject to references. So the references that you take up are also part of the selection process. So you can send out to previous employers and ask for references. Depending on the job, you may also do criminal records checks at the point where you're offering the job or you've made the job offer. You may also carry out medical questionnaires. So there's all sorts of different other checks that you might do. Also making sure they've got the right to work in the UK. Obviously, company can't afford to employ people who don't have the necessary permits to work in the UK. So that's all very important as well, making sure you're complying with the immigration legislation. So, gone through all of those checks, everything's perfectly fine. You contact your candidate and you say, right, okay, really impressed with how well you did at the interview. We would like to offer you the job. Generally speaking, it will be followed up in writing, whether that's a formal letter or an email. But initially, sometimes the initial contact can be by telephone. I would recommend that companies shouldn't contact the unsuccessful candidates to tell them they've been unsuccessful until after the person you're offering the job to accepts the job. The last thing you want is to contact someone and say, look, I'm really, really sorry, we've chosen someone else this time. You did really well at the interview, but unfortunately there was a candidate who performed better. So you're not offering them the job. And they're all really upset. And then you contact your successful candidate, you offer them the job, and they say, well, actually, I've been offered a job somewhere else and I'm actually going to take that one. You then have to go back to the person that you said goodbye to and offer them the job. It doesn't look very professional for the company. These things happen. It does happen all the time. But if you don't contact the unsuccessful candidates until you know whether or not the person you want to offer the job to is going to accept it, then it looks better for the company if your second choice is then offered the job. So contact the successful candidate, offer them the job. Once they've accepted, you can then contact the unsuccessful candidates. I think at this stage, a lot of companies don't respond when you apply for a job. They don't tell you whether you've been successful or not. But if someone's actually made the effort to come along to interview, attend the induction attend the assessment centres and whatever else you've done, it's good practice for the company to let them know that they've been unsuccessful rather than just have them hanging about forever waiting to find out. So that's part of the job offer, and as part of that process as well, you would also contact the candidate or the successful candidate, send them notification of the terms and conditions. Depending on what the procedures that within the company is, you may send out contract of employment. That may be something that's issued at induction, but you'll certainly send them instructions about what the job offer is, what the job is, what the salary is, confirm who the line manager is, confirm is the induction the first thing they've got to do, or do they report for work and then induction follows after that? So, give them starting details, who to report to, when to turn up, those sorts of things. You send all of that out. And the next stage after that would be the induction itself, which is what we're going on to look at now. So some of the terminology for induction has been changing a little bit over the past couple of years. So induction is a term you're going to be more familiar with, and we use it for employment. We also use it in the college for students starting a new course. So it's a way of introducing you to something new to you. So whether it's introducing you to the new company and your new job, or introducing you to the college, to the course, chance to get to grips with what's expected of you. But the main purpose of induction is so that the employee is able to do their job as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible, so that they know what's expected of them, they know what to do, how to do the job, and that the performance standards or the objectives that are set for the employees at that standard as quickly as possible. The next bullet point talks about onboarding, which is not so much just about the idea of making sure the employee is able to do the job as quickly as possible. So induction tends to be quite narrowly focused on the ability to do the job, getting them in, getting them able to do the job. Onboarding is about integrating them into the company, so they feel part of the company, they understand the culture, they understand what the company is, what their purpose is, and how they fit into that organisation. So it's much broader, and it's a good way of getting to know the company and their place within that. And as it says at the bottom, 33% of employees will leave within the first 30 days of starting if induction's not done properly or just not done at all. And again, things like if the job description is not clear enough, if the person specification, the job doesn't live up to what they expected it to be, then their psychological contract has been breached and they're going to leave. That's it in a nutshell. And although it's talking about the first 30 days here, if a company has a lot of employees who leave within the first year of the company, a lot of new starts are starting and they're not there by the end of the year. If that happens a lot, we can sometimes call that the induction crisis. So where there's turnover that's really high, but it's only high with new starts, that would be classified as the induction process, but it's a 12-month period, not just this, like the first 30 days. But if you've got people that are leaving constantly within that first 30 days, it's costing a lot of money for the company. It's not productive because they're constantly having to keep advertise, keep recruiting, they're constantly having to go through all that process, the training, the advertising. Perhaps the existing staff are under pressure because they're having to cover, because there's constantly vacancies, so they're having to cover, and it could be putting the existing staff under stress as well. So, this is something that the company would have to take very seriously. So, what are the purposes of induction? And then we're going to look at as well what actually goes into, or what should be an induction. So, purpose of induction is to make sure that health and safety is covered, that you do any health and safety requirement that's required, because a company has a duty of care to make sure that all its employees are safe. Provision and clarification of essential policies and procedures. So, at induction, HR or health and safety, or it could be the line manager, but someone will go through the key policies and procedures within the organisation, so the employees know if they're off sick, what the procedure is, who to report to, what the disciplinary procedure is, are there any key requirements in terms of processes and procedures that have to be done within the organisation, whether it's logging on to systems, how to access email, using ID badges. All of these things, they have to go through the key documentation with the employees. An introduction to the organisation, that could be telling them about the organisation, going over the organisational chart, going through the main purpose of the organisation, what its main products are, who its main clients are. But sometimes companies will also want to go over the history of the organisation if it's something they're proud of. They may want to give a bit of background as well. It's important with induction that the new employee understands what their job is, what the requirements are, and what their responsibilities are. What are they expected to be doing? Making sure that they meet their colleagues, the other people they're going to be working with. Clarification of expectations, that could be down to almost having like an initial performance meeting where, a review would obviously be looking, or an appraisal would be looking at past performance, looking at how they're performing, have they met the standards. So at the beginning, at induction, you might want to set what those standards are, make it clear that, this is what we expect of you, and a timescale as to by when they would expect you to be up to standard. And that's perhaps where some companies will have trial periods. So by the end of the trial period, they would expect you to be working to a particular standard. So you need to know what those standards are before you start. Otherwise, how do you know if you're meeting them? And if you don't get training, if you don't get support, if it's not clear, it can be more problematic. So it's important for the company, if they want the employees to be working at that standard, they have to make sure that the support is there at induction so that the employees know what they've got to do. And obviously, perhaps it should be at the beginning rather than at the end, but just welcoming the person into the company, making sure they feel welcome, making sure that they feel that they're part of the team and that they're valued, and trying to be encouraging and upbeat, and talking about rewards and policies, and you're not just going over the policies and procedures, but you're talking about the practices that are in place that can motivate employees. What are the benefits of working in this organisation for them that will make them want to work harder? For some people, it could be down to pay and reward. For other people, it could be promotion opportunities, training opportunities. We're all driven by different things, and this is where your motivation comes in as well. So the induction process itself, what should be an induction? Well, it should be a company overview. I've gone through most of this already, probably. Company overview, looking at the products and services of the company, who its customers are, looking at the company's mission, its vision, what it's trying to achieve, what its culture and values are. It's really important the employees know that so that they support it and can be part of it. And looking at the organisational structure, maybe a tour of the company so that they know where everything is, know where to find things, but also at the same point to introduce them to their colleagues, the team they're working with, but perhaps also other people that they may have regular contact with. So for myself, as a lecturer, your induction might include the other lecturers within your department, the management within your department, but it could also include reception staff, staff in the LRC, maybe some of the learning support team. So the people that perhaps we have to interact with as well. There will be some health and safety training. There will be something covering the health and safety procedures. Employees would either be told where to access all of the different policies and procedures, or traditionally you would have been given a copy of them, but I think more and more now these are available online. What else? Have I gone backwards or haven't I? Right, okay. So they would look at the terms and conditions that they've actually got, what the hours of work are, when your lunch breaks are, how many holidays you're entitled to, when you get paid, all the basic things that would be in your terms and conditions. They should go over these at induction. Tour of the building, as I said, where the where the toilets are, where to go if you're a smoker, where the coffee point is, or the canteen, where the different places are that are important to you, as well as obviously for me things like where I can find student records and different things like that as well. And again, if they're in different campuses or different locations, you may want a tour of the different locations as well for them at some point. General information, most of those I've talked about as well. Job specific overview, so obviously that would be down to, different parts of the induction process will be addressed by different managers. So the HR department would probably go through the HR policies and procedures. If you have someone who's dedicated in health and safety, like a health and safety officer, health and safety would go through the health and safety stuff. Tour of the building. It could be a manager. Equally, if the company appoints you with like a mentor or something like that, it could be a colleague or a mentor. But the job specific overview, that's more likely to be your manager, because the manager will have a better understanding of your job, so they can take you through what's involved, how to do your job, maybe introduce you to your buddy or a colleague that you're going to be working closely with, so that if you've got any questions, you know who to ask. Financial, pay, organising your payroll details, banking, things like that, but it may also be any other financial things, benefits maybe attached to the job as well. Probably also cover things like pensions, any training, learning and development opportunities that may be available to you, or maybe what the policy is within the organisation. Do they run specific training? Do they have online learning that's available to anybody? So it will vary from company to company. This will be very company specific. Any legal or contractual compliance that has to be gone through. So if you're part of a professional body, they might look for evidence of that. They may look for evidence of your qualifications. If you have to complete any criminal records checks or anything like that, those sorts of things might fall under that. It would also be things like your right to work in the UK, and we all have to do that. Even if you're a UK citizen, you still have to be able to show that you are eligible to work in the UK. Establish positive and productive relationships. Well, they're benefits, I suppose, rather than things that would actually happen. So by getting to know people, by having team sessions and things like that, so it brings you together, gets you a chance to know people, allows you to settle quicker into the role, and you're more likely to be up to speed in the job much more quickly because you've had the support and direction, so it's much clearer at the start what you're doing, so you'll be able to get up to speed much more quickly. It allows you to ask any questions that you might have, if there's anything you're not clear about, and by doing induction and having it phased over a period of time, it also allows you to get the information in almost like in installments, so you're not getting too much at one time, because if you get information overload, it can just be too much and you don't know where to start. Which is partly why I broke the presentation into two halves and why I'm not going to cover the entire presentation, because I don't want to give you guys information overload either. And as I said, if we don't have effective induction or induction's not happening, then 30% of the workforce the new starts can leave within the first 30 days. So if you do it all correctly and the person feels appreciated, feels part of the team, feels that they fit in well and the job lives up to their expectations, you're more likely to retain the staff as well, which obviously has a cost implication for the business, because you're not constantly having to recruit and replace people that are leaving all the time. So we've talked about a couple of pieces of legislation, but there's a lot of legislation covered that's related to recruitment and selection and induction. The Equalities Act, obviously, as I said, making sure that you're not discriminating against anybody while you're carrying out the recruitment and selection process, or when you're carrying out the induction process. Data protection, GDPR, again, how you store data, what data you store, how long you hold it for, particularly since you've got candidates applying to you who are not successful. So it's not just about how you hold and store the data for the successful successful candidates and the employees, but it's also about how long you're entitled to retain the paperwork for the unsuccessful candidates, because you have to keep it for a certain period of time, just in case someone claims that they've been unfairly treated throughout the process, that you're able to go back and produce evidence that shows that they were treated fairly. Human Rights Act, fixed term employees, so that's your not part-time workers, but temporary workers. Rehabilitation of offenders, criminal records checks, safeguarding of vulnerable groups, and the Immigration, Asylum and Nationality Act. I would suggest that you look into all of these in a little bit of detail so that you're familiar with what all of them are. But I've touched on most of them, I think, today as well anyway. Right, okay, so that's us finished for